Hey guys, it's Monday morning here in Australia. So, welcome. It's Caroline, career and leadership coach. And today I want to talk about interview rejections because I was talking to potential clients last week, and she's a senior manager, went through to first round interviews, second round interviews, third round interviews, and then she was a final of two candidates and they chose the other candidate. Now, if you're interviewing, this might sound very familiar to you. And to be honest, it just sucks because when I was talking to her, it started to affect multiple areas in her life. So it started to affect her self-confidence. It started also to affect how she was showing up in an interview. It started to affect like that she thought like, okay, why do I even bother? Because there's so many opportunities and you just like lose all hope. Because afterwards, and definitely in her case, she wanted to desperately get out of her current situation. And afterwards, it's like, I have to start all over again. And you have to put yourself through the test. You have to do your research. You have to do everything. So there's a couple of strategies that I want to share with you guys on how to actually manage interview rejections and what to do. Now, what I'm interested in before I go into that is if you put in the comments, like if you experience that and the strategies that you have used and want to share with others, and maybe your biggest takeaway after this live stream that you've had is that like, yeah, I want to implement that. That sounds awesome, Caroline. So there are a few things that you need to know that not a lot of people take into account. Interviewing is a skill, and a skill you need to learn. And the only way you learn a new skill is by practice, practice, practice. But most people that I work with through the Career Success Program, they don't have practice, practice, practice. They have been in a job for 5 years and they're looking for the next step up. And they just realizing, like, I haven't interviewed for ages. And the higher up in the corporate ladder you go, the more competitive it becomes. And you have to really be really good in an interview because just being good is not good enough. It's not going to cut it. So you need to be persuasive. You need to understand how to influence and navigate the whole interview process. So there are a couple of aspects in that. And actually, I want to elaborate on that too, because I think it's important for you to know what you need to do before the interview to nail the interview. And there are a couple of things. Like I said, like interviewing is a skill and you can learn. So first of all, of course, there is preparation. But the preparation that most people do is just in one area. They learn about the company, they learn about the people they're going to meet, and they learn maybe about the job description on how relevant that is. But what they don't learn and take away is like, okay, what kind of interview is it basically going to be? Is it going to be a behavioral based interview, competency based interview? Is it just going to be a scenario based interview? And what is it? Or is it just going to be the famous informal interview? And here's the thing about informal interviews. Informal interviews, they don't exist. Hear this right. Informal interviews don't exist. Why not? Is because at the end, they will still make a judgment if you are good for the role or not. So you have to still, like, even though they might treat it as informal, you still need to be formal and convincing them about your capability and making sure that you articulate very clearly in the interview that that you can do the job, and not only can do the job, but that you can overachieve in the job, that you are the candidate for the job. So your preparation is really key to setting the right foundation, to knowing what you step into, because most people don't know it. They leave the gap open and they have like missing information and they just show up and they're like a sitting duck, and it's like the interview is happening to me instead of me participating in that. The second part of the interview is, of course, the interview itself. And there are three things that you need to realize when you step into an interview. So, or the interviewer has a different mindset. Like he thinks like, I'm meeting the CEO and what's the plan for next year? Or I just had a fight with my spouse back at home. So the mind is somewhere else. And no matter how good you do in the interview, it's very hard to actually just overcome that. So you have that you don't have that in your control, but it's not a reflection of you. So that's the key here. It's not a reflection of you. So that's the first scenario. Second scenario is you're not a culture fit. And there is nothing wrong with that neither. Because again, it's two ways. If you don't fit in the culture, be happy that you don't progress in the organization. Because basically, if it works two ways, you don't fit in it, and you wouldn't be happy and wouldn't be able to thrive, to be fulfilled, challenged, and you wouldn't be able to make an impact in that organization or in that role. The third reason, and it's really, really important, and that most people don't realize, is actually your job in the interview is you need to give the confidence to the other person that you are better than the other candidates. Now, that is your job. So if you don't give the right confidence, if you know I can do this job with my eyes closed, standing on my head, and I would just nail this job, then you need to bring that energy into the interview. Of course, you don't have to be too full on neither. You have to moderate yourself. But you know what I mean? You need to bring, so those are the three things that people actually take away in an interview, how they can, of course, there's like, it's very elaborate. Like I work like with my clients in depth on this, and we do mock interviews to actually make sure that they master all the interviews techniques and that they know how to overcome certain objections. Because objections they will have, and one of the biggest objections that there is like and you know it, if you change industries, is in the back of their mind, in the back of your mind, you don't have industry experience. And how annoying is that you go through all the interviews and at the end they say like, oh yeah, we chose a candidate with more industry experience. It's like, you knew that from the start, from the first time they were interviewed, or even like by looking at my resume. So this is really important for you to actually make sure that you give the confidence by handling the objections, by being persuasive in the interview, by knowing how to navigate that and really build that rapport with them. Because I have seen people that actually have changed industries and they were interviewing with people that came from the same industry, and it's like that the other person was able to give that confidence more than the other candidates, and they typically only hire people with industry experience. So, and then that's changed their frame that they were operating in. But and I've seen people that had less experience than was required, or didn't have that leadership or management or people management experience, that yet they were able to secure that role. And that is how you show up in the interview and the confidence that you can give. Now, all right, taking it all back, the next step. So you have the interview, you thought you did well, you received the rejection, heartbreaking, but you need to actually pull yourself up, because you don't want to take that energy in the next job search. So the first thing you need to know is how to shake things off, to actually get rid of that negative emotion and to actually get back on the horse and to actually say like, okay, now I'm going to take the next step and show up really the way I need to show up for the next interview. And if at any stage you recognize that you don't master the skills, because interviewing is a skill, and skill you can learn, and the learning you only do by practicing. If you recognize that your skill is rusty, then reach out. Don't stay in the same circle over and over again. We all know the definition of insanity by Albert Einstein. It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome, which is like insane. So if you know that your skills are not up to date and not where they should be, and if you actually think like, okay, I need to change something to get a different outcome, then look for help. Look on how can I do more mock interviews? How can I get more practice? How can I get real feedback? So after the interview, when you get the rejection, there are a couple of things you can do. So the first thing that you can do is ask for feedback. And I know what you're thinking, Caroline, they never give me feedback. And part of it, that's true, but also part of it is because it's not specific enough what you give the feedback, what you ask feedback. It's like most people ask, if you're a recruiter or the hiring manager or HR, they say like, oh, do you have any feedback? Oh no, you had great skills and experience, just the other candidate had a little bit more. That's it. So I don't say this is a magic pill, but try to actually be very specific on when you ask for feedback. It's like, okay, what are the 3 things that I could have done better in the interview? Can you be really specific? I'm looking to improve myself. Like, and ask those specific things. Or you can even mention, like, look, there were a couple of areas in the interview that I was unsure about. Would there be possible to have a chat with somebody to understand if those were the areas? But be very self-aware. And the key here is not to be defensive. Most people, when they get real interview feedback, they get defensive. So, for example, if I say to somebody like, oh, didn't really have the feeling you had enough experience with senior stakeholders and managing the strategy and driving the budgets and making sure the timelines are met, whatever. They go like, oh, yes, of course I have, because I've done that this here. That doesn't matter anymore. Stop being defensive. The key here is that you take it on board and that you say like, okay, this is the third thing that I was saying. Like, you didn't give the confidence in the interview that you did that. So make a note of that. Secondly, what I want you to start being in the habit of is basically connecting really with the people and sending a thank you note after you got the rejection. And you have to see if it's appropriate, but in most cases it is appropriate that you say like, really enjoyed meeting you for the interview. I understand that somebody else has been successful in securing the role, but really keen to stay in contact and maybe open discussions again if there's another opportunity. Boom! You actually expanded your network. And it may not go anywhere, but I know so many people, clients of mine, that it actually did go somewhere because they had such a great interview. They were so impressed with the thank you notes afterwards, after the rejection, that they actually like, you know what? After a couple of weeks, they had another role coming up, and definitely because it was a big organization, and they contacted him and said like, actually, we think this role might be the role that's good for you. And then he already had like an in-way in the organization. He had internal referrals. And that is just magic to have that, and to have that referral network, because then you are referred internally for another position. So I want you to actually just like stop like just thinking like, oh, I've been rejected and there's no point, and yeah, why am I even bothering, and I'm just not good enough, and there are other candidates better. I want you to actually think about the positive side. I made a great connection with the person, and I had a really good conversation, and now I'm going to reach out to them and send a thank you note, and potentially, and you send an email, and then you say like, look, at the end of the email, you say like, look, I might actually, I'll send you a connection request through LinkedIn. Would be great to stay in touch. And that's how you expand your network. So you have to think about a networking perspective also. And then there is a third way how to manage interview rejections is you need to learn. And you might say, yeah, Caroline, I'm learning. No, not a lot of people are. It's like, what you need to do is after the interview, write down, even if you don't have the outcome yet, write down all the questions that they asked. And say, and then when you ask feedback, you can also refer to those questions. Like, there were a couple of questions that I actually wasn't clear on. Are those the areas? And you can be more specific. But more importantly, is because you write down the questions, you can actually practice your response and make sure you can give the confidence. Because let's just say it again. Interviewing is a skill you can learn, and something you need to learn by practice. So I hope this helped. If this was inspirational, I want you to list your takeaways below this live stream so I can have an idea about what it is that is your biggest ha moment and your biggest takeaway from this. If you really liked it, give me thumbs up and help me spread my message, or share this live stream with anybody that you know that needs to hear this message, because there's so many people that go through the interview process and actually get stuck and bounce their head against a brick wall. And I know how frustrating that can be. And it's not only impacting on your mental state, but it's your career, and you take it home and you just like feel stuck that you can't move from where you are to where you want to be. Now, if you want to take that to the next step, and if you really see like, Caroline, I've been listening and following you for a while, and I'm ready to take action, and I'm ready to take my career to the next step, book in a call, newhorizoncoaching.com.au/call. And what we're going to do, we're going to do a big picture plan for you, a strategy plan. It's like, not a lot of people are intentional about their career. So you and I are jumping on a call and be more strategic about where we can take your career and what you do. So what I want to know, because every situation is different, so what I want to know is your current situation, where you at, where you want to be, all the roadblocks in between, and how we can come up with a plan to make that better, to overcome that, to finally get you moving forward in your career. And all the rest will fall into place. And at the end, if you say like, look, it sounds interesting, I want you to help me really implement that strategy, then we can talk about that also. But either way, you will walk away with a very clear strategy about how to move your career forward and take the next step. So if that sounds good, and if that sounds like something that you want to do, just even like now, today, or this week, or this end of the year, to get ready for 2020, because you don't want to start in 2020 and be behind everybody else. If you say like, now is my time, then book in a call, newhorizoncoaching.com.au/call. If you don't know what I do, I'm a career and leadership coach, and I help professionals like yourself land their next six-figure leadership role. So that is about standing out, getting more interviews, so you can land that next leadership role. All right, and I work, by the way, with people all over the world. So hope that was a good insight for Monday morning. And I will talk to you tomorrow. See ya. Bye.